Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirit Saga video. And today we're going to be talking about all the purple cards in False Gods, or Set 2 for Battle Spirit Saga, also featuring the Gundam collab. So, as always with red and kind of with all the future color reveals that we're going to be doing, there were three kind of new decks or archetypes that were ultimately introduced per color, or 2.5 depending on like what support they got. So at least for purple, it's 3, right? So we have the Undead, which is going to be a lot of the self-mill and recursion strategy. We have the Void Lords, which is also like half self-reviving, half you could do fun stuff with Void Lords. That's kind of really that 2.5 vibe. And then the last one, which is Shadows, which if you've been following the channel for a while, I am super excited about. I love the Nemesis package of self-destruction for all this value. And then, of course, some of those undead cards also go into Shadow. But really, this is more of what I've spent the last almost 6 months talking about now, that purple is finally getting the tools that's going to separate it and really have more of these decks kind of go into their own paths, where instead it was like, you know, purple mid-range soup that we had for set 1, or purple control soup that we had for set 1. So I'm very excited at a high level where each one of these are going. I do think there's a little bit more work and a little bit more support that each one of them are going to need, but we will cover that throughout the course of this video and talk about some of the spoilers themselves. So without further ado, let's get into it. And of course, again, I just got to say right off the bat here, you know, we have all these good vanillas, you know, that made up a lot of set 2 that, you know, it really does feel like some of these had text on them at some point, and then for one reason or another, they got cut. Like, if we look at the amount of vanillas that we have for this set versus how other Battle Spirits sets were designed, it doesn't quite make a lot of sense because we don't have like that big of a shadow payoff. Yes, we have things like Abandoned Guillotine, but it does feel a little bit too vanilla, you know, for a set 2, and hopefully set 3 can again kind of avoid this problem. So not going to cover a lot of these in detail. Again, they're vanillas. Some of them I'm sure we'll see play if the archetype matters or if the BP thresholds check out, but otherwise it's going to be largely a skip. So let's start talking about the Void Ogre Emperor himself. It is a 10 cost with 6 reduction, but this one is ultimately interesting because you get to select a Void Lord or Undead Spirit card, which, fun fact, can be Maduke, which is probably one of the better things that you're going to be doing with this card anyways, but let's pretend it's just Void Lords. Summon it without paying its cost, and then Spirits summoned with this effect do not have their when summon effects activated. So it's really just about putting 2 bodies onto the board, and well, to be fair, 2 big bodies, right? A lot of them being 7k for 1 is very relevant, and then of course being some kind of additional effect for level 2, and then the real big thing being at level 3 but costs 6 cores. So at level 2 and 3 it has Curse. Man, it's already a 10k for 4 cores at that point. Having Curse a lot of the time isn't going to be relevant unless you're going against white and they have like suppression and stuff like that. Generally speaking, you're playing purple, you have Curse stuff, you're either using Curse to break through blockers or you're using the Undead Immortality package to break through blockers. A 10k Curse is kind of just whatever in this case, but all the Void Lords kind of follow that similar pattern. And then at level 3 for 6 cores, when the spirit attacks, your opponent selects one of their spirits, remove 3 cores from it, and place it in their reserve. So this is cute because it can line up with other card effects that you're going to have. You know, be it the purple strip, be it you just want them to be weaker to turn off one of their when block effects. Like, there's a lot of neat stuff that it can be doing, but again, for 6 cores to get that effect, I really feel like this one could have been a lot cheaper. Yes, it does go up to 15k, and it maintains Curse for whatever reason, other than just, you know, a carryover from level 2, but you know, sometimes just a 15k Curse is going to end the game because it's killing anything that your opponent tries to put in front of it. So I'm really curious to see if the, you know, more undead side of this becomes relevant. But ultimately, I think the Void Lords kind of do miss a little bit of the support that they needed to really shine in set 2. But again, I think this card could find home elsewhere. Going into our other X-Rare, kind of the other archetype, is the Floating Grave White Whale, the Undead shenanigans. So this is again self-mill. So when the spirit attacks, discard the top 3 cards of your deck, select one of your opponent's spirits for each spirit card discarded this way. So again, very heavy spirit focused deck you want to be. Remove all but 1 core from each of those spirits and put it into their reserve. So I like what this can do, right? If we have things like Mord, or if we just want to core theft out a, you know, problematic blocker, this can make things very difficult for your opponent. The fact that you can just shrink down 3 things at, you know, instant speed, as it were, can be very, very strong and disrupt a lot of strategies. Now, that said, it is only a 5k at level 1, and this guy costs 8. Like, I get it that the immortality is going to be very, very strong, and you had to balance it out some way, but 5K and then even 6K, like it just gets volcanic braked, which feels terrible, or it gets dragon kinged, right? I really feel like they could have made the level 2 7K just to balance it out a little bit more, but I get that it is a strong effect. And then, of course, at level 2 and level 3, when one of your spirits attacks reduces your opponent's life, select one of your opponent's spirits, place 1 core from it into the reserve. So you can very clearly tell how the level 1, when spirit attacks, and then the second part of it triggers as well, because it's anytime during your attack step, not just a spirit, right? And that goes really well with immortality as well. So I get how they're building this up. I get that, again, it goes into the immortality strategy where you're just having a lot of attackers, and one way or another, sure, your opponent might block that 2K, but then it's rested, and then your immortality is going to trigger. Then you're bringing back 3 more units, right? And then you're getting 3 more attacks in, which is either going to kill them or, in theory, delete their board. Like, that's fine. Obviously, Beldegor can kill something as well, so it's maybe 4 or 5 things that you're clearing out of the way. But again, I do think that the 6K power here can really hold this back, even if it is a very, very, very strong ability. So how good will Immortality be in set 2? Obviously, there's a lot of testing to be done. I think this can be a very good card for what it wants to be doing. Obviously, this goes into the now Undead archetype and some of the other cards that we're going to see later that matter. But I really am curious to see where Volcanic Break and Dragno King are going to land. Going into our Undead package, we have the Corpse Giant Gigasha, 5 cost, 2 reduction, Immortality 6 or 10. So spoiler, the Void Lords, or Black Lance, for example, if we want to just throw like a good relevant 6 cost out there. So Immortality, so it can come back, and when the spirit attacks, select one of your opponent's spirits with 1 core. That spirit cannot block. So very quickly, you can see how well that this can combo with the whale and just making stuff unblockable. So really, this deck is going to be a kind of a stall out until you have that perfect graveyard setup. Maybe you're using Cursed Dragon to ramp up a bunch of cores that you're going to need to feed into this strategy, right? So maybe you still have Bishop and Cursed Dragon somewhere in the combo, or maybe it's just Cursed Dragon's good enough. We will see. But this does lend itself to, okay, not only are we now threatening multiple attackers, this can then loop into Beldegor, which is really relevant as well, or Beldegor when this one dies, right? Because it's a 5 cost. So now we're quickly chaining 2 or 3 attacks off one guy. So I think that's really something to be said about the power of what this deck wants to be doing. If you get into a top deck battle with your opponent and they are low on life, it now becomes a, hey, I'm going to top deck a relevant card, and then I'm going to chain it into, 4 or 5 or 6 attacks off a single card. And truthfully, no other deck in the format or in the game period can do that. So I think it is a very strong effect. But again, these can get costly. Everything is going to cost 2 or 3 per thing you're bringing back. So it really is going to remains to be seen, if Cursed Dragon can kind of be enough to fulfill that package requirement for the amount of cores you need, or are we gonna have a more slow and fair game, and maybe you're only getting 3 attacks in, but 3 can be enough. And then the same thing for this one. Yes, the lower BPs might seem like a negative at first, but again, you want this to die in combat. Like, you want to have a lower BP on every single one of your immortality cards. So it's a really careful gamble that you have to take between the 2K versus 3K. And of course, what they're going to be blocking with, you can almost certainly never get this to be a 5K, right? Like, that most likely, unless you know that it's going to be like your first attack and dying immediately, you never want to put 6 cores on this thing. Why that's even a thing, who knows? But 5K is an interesting number because it breaks that 4K threshold, which is one of the important ones, 6K being the other important BP threshold. So I'm really curious to see where that part of this card lines up in the format overall. But ultimately, the 5K just feels like something you're never going to care about at the end of the day. Moving on from there, we have our Gravedigger Skeleton, 3 cost, 1 reduction. When summoned, you may select a spirit card that costs 2 or fewer from your trash and summon it exhausted. So this is just a great way to get a number of 2 cost spirits back. Yes, it does come into play exhausted. Yes, this is only a 1K. Does hit a 4K threshold, which is very important for a 2-drop, which is pretty shocking to see out of purple. But again, it does allow you to kind of ramp up symbols onto your board, which is really, really cool. So maybe not the most exciting thing. Yes, it is, again, undead, so it goes back into that immortality package. We're going to be milling a bunch of stuff. So just getting more 2-drops for blockers is great. And again, we're just going to be kind of cycling more cards out of our graveyard. Really lends itself well to that package. But, are the 2 costs going to be good enough in purple, where we see a higher concentration of them compared to like the normal 4 that you might include in a deck, and then it becomes a consistency thing, right? So very curious to see where the Undead package lines up overall, but it could be a very, very good card. A card that I am very excited about, even though it does cost a lot, right, is Imperial Knight God Avalo Paladion. So this is a, in my opinion, just going to be an automatic staple for what the Nemesis deck wants to be doing. So when destroyed, so again, flat out, when destroyed, doesn't care if you do it, your opponent does it, just flat 4K blocker. Select one of your opponent's spirits, remove 7 of its cores, and place it into its reserve. So this dude is killing something, right? So it is just a great deadly balance or Nemesis target. But then also what's really interesting is during either end step, hint, either, really important, if 1 or more of your spirits have been destroyed this turn, draw 2 cards at the start of the end step. So this one is really great because now it's giving you a blocker opportunity. So like those Beldegors are getting even more value, right, as it were. And it is just a great, you know, kind of draw engine for the deck. For those that have played the Nemesis deck, a lot of times you're relying on Rotting Swamp or in early depths, right, to be your draw package to help you find some of those cards, or if you get ahead enough with Nemesis, so you can even draw more cards. So this is just a great body that is going to act as part 1, more removal, which it needs to be if it's a 7 cost, right? Or 2, maybe you draw the 2nd or 3rd one after that good removal, and you say, hey, now I just need to draw some cards, and this is exactly what you're going to want. So a little bit bummed out he didn't get the SPR, because I think it would have been sick, but I think the other SPRs they picked is very, very good as well. But man, this maybe we get this guy as a promo in the future, because he just deserves to be this glorious full art. Like, I think this card is absolutely what you want to be doing in the overall Nemesis package. Is Shadows going to be good enough? Again, remains to be seen. I think it's definitely, you know, like purple mid-range Shadows is going to be like slightly behind the other purple decks you can be doing, but I think this deck in particular got a lot of love in set 2 to at least make it more viable, which is really important. And then the other card, which really brings it all together, which did get an SPR and is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous card, is Dark Knight Lamrock. So when it's destroyed, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove 1 of its cores and place it into the reserve. So again, it's like, you know, the Crimson Mail combo. Now, if you really want to pull it off, right, you can just kill 2 things out of nowhere, which can be really good for Shadows. But probably most importantly is the second effect, so level 2 and level 3, and it is a 4K for 3 cores, and I want to stress that is very relevant. This does have the power to stay on the board because it does pass that threshold. So really love to see that this did actually get the 4K. I honestly expected them to make it a 3K just because, and then obviously 5 for 6, just it never matters. But a 4 for 3, we'll definitely take that. The first time one of your purple spirits is destroyed each turn, return that spirit from your trash to your hand. So it is interesting that it says destroyed each turn versus during your turn for the level 2 effect. So a little bit of interesting wording if that matters later on. But it allows you to self-sacrifice your stuff and bring it back to your hand. So Lamrock is really the other half of this deck's engine, and truthfully exactly what the deck wanted. So it's something that you can play early. It can get to 4K, which is relevant, so it sticks on the board. It can help other stuff, you know, play around Crimson Mail if there's more low-to-the-ground strategies that warrant us playing Crimson Mail. Probably not, but fun to think about anyways. But it does allow us to sacrifice some of our other spirits, or if we just get a 4 or 5 back, you know, during combat, right? So like we attack with our 4 or 5, they block it, we get a Beldegor back from the graveyard, because, right, Beldegor is just very good and we're still going to play it. And then Lamrock lets us get that 4 cost back. So we're now able to threaten, hey, on our next turn, I'm going to replay this 4 or 5 drop and get my Beldegors back again. Or again, just attacking with Nemesis, popping off 2 cores, sacrificing your own guy, immediately goes back to hand, and then you have a Beldegor come back as well. So, like, there's so much more that this card enables. I'm super excited to pick up the SPR for this, because it's just a very fun deck to play. I think the way the format's going to go, because of, I think, where green is going to land, I think leaning more into Cursed Dragon is going to be really, really important. But I really enjoy playing the Nemesis deck, and as someone who spent a bit of time trying to, like, brew it up and you know, try to find the best version of it, I think Dark Knight is definitely going to get us there. Now moving into some interesting Serpent options, which again does combo with Rotting Swamp if we want to have like this more serpent style of deck. So Divine, Saturn, Dragon, Chronos, Boros. 6 cost, 2 reduction. When destroyed by opponent, so this one does have that by opponent clause, your opponent selects one of their spirits, remove 3 of its cores, and place it into its reserve. So this is important because it can also trigger the immortality that we talked about previously, which can then combo down through the Beldegor. It's something that just wants to be attacking to remove other threats. And then what's interesting too is the when summoned at level 2. So again, having the ability to play around Star Blessed Draw is really, really cute. If you spend a soul core as part of the spirit summoning cost, your opponent selects one of their spirits and remove a core from it that is not the soul core. And place it into the void, excuse me. So it deramps them as well. So this is interesting because it does give us the idea that we might have more of a resource choke happen. Now, again, it does have that 4 for 3 threshold, and it does want to be destroyed. So it's an interesting pick, but, is it good enough to bring this back off of, Rotting Swamp, and it's something that we just want to keep threatening that core leech, I guess, right, for lack of a better word. It's interesting. So I really do like more of this like taxation style that can come into play, and maybe this one gets to see more play with the blue around the corner in set 3, which also has more of these taxation style effects. So overall, I really love the design for this card. I have not a clue where it's going to end up seeing play. I do think that, like, the level 1 and just kind of being a body that destroys something with it while looping into other immortalities could mean that this makes a spot in the undead style of deck. But otherwise, I think it's going to be an interesting one that, the when summons cute might not end up being strong enough to deramp somebody by 1 core, but I could see multiple of these getting very crazy if you play them kind of back to back. Going into more serpents, the Viper, 2 cost 1 reduction. Select one of your opponent's Nexus, place 1 core from it onto the reserve. So this one is either going to be like back-breaking insane or just not relevant at all. It might have to wait until set 3 where blue and has all their Nexus shenanigans, but this effectively threatens a meta. Like the power is whatever, right? You don't care that it's a 2 and a 3K. That is completely whatever. This is a card that you're generally going to be playing on a turn where your opponent, especially let's just say they're on Blessed Cathedral, they have 3 cores, because 3 cores is a lot, and you can never put 4 on Blessed Cathedral unless you're way far ahead at that point. They're going to go, hey, I'm going to put 3 cores on Blessed Cathedral. I'm going to put these spirits on the board, and I'm going to try to ramp and draw some cards. And you, as a purple player, is going to say, oh, I am so sorry, my friend. I'm just going to fling one of those cores off, and now your Blessed Cathedral is offline, and I am just going to swing through and punish you very heavily for it. So, is this a main deck card? I'm not too entirely sure. It could be a really spicy sideboard slot because, again, there's not too much that we care about with Serpents. It is a 2 cost that, is not all that exciting. It's not something you're going to play early for, reductions. Like, this is a card you very heavily have to lean into for its when summoned effect. So it is more of like a 2 to a 3 of that's going to be featured in a lot of decks for when you just want to be able to swing through and turn off their effect. So really interesting card. I'm very excited to see where this lands. Again, very solid sideboarding option for a lot of things, but ultimately, Serpent's not mattering too much yet. I think it's cute that you can loop it off of Rotting Swamp and then have multiple times where you can turn off their Nexus. Probably not what you're going to be wanting to do, but, if we do build more of a Black Lance style of deck, then yeah, this could be like a 1 to 2 of main deck and like a 1 to 2 of an addition in the sideboard. That's probably more than fine. So very solid card. Definitely one of the ones I'm more excited for out of purple, just for the opportunities and the different play patterns it's going to line up. The other card that we just have to be excited about, even if it's only a 2 for 3, right, is our Diviner Drago Naga. So when summoned, if you spend the Soul Core, you get to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, discard any number of them, which is super important for the undead style of deck, and then return any to the top of the deck in any order. So again, just for all the self-mill stuff that we want to be doing, maybe you want to fix your card draws. This card does it all for what those style of decks want to be doing. Is it good enough compared to the other purple decks that just want to say, hey, let's just draw a card instead if we're going to be paying, the Soul Core, or if we're going to be triggering a when summon, like we really want to make sure we're just drawing a card? Who knows? I think this definitely does heavily lean itself into the more undead style of deck or the immortality, where it's like, we never want to draw that 5-drop, or we never want to draw the other immortality guy, the 1 in 4 immortality that we're going to talk about shortly. Like, those just have to go to the graveyard every single time, and this makes sure that you don't hit those dead cards. So, again, I think it's definitely something that you're very likely going to want to test very early on to see if it's worth a spot or not. You know, again, being a 3-cost on only 1 reduction and having, you know, not the biggest BP, so it's 6 on the board, I think is going to be probably what holds it back overall. But again, if you're playing the undead strategy, I think you just have to play this card as a 4-of because it does everything that you want it to do, but ultimately probably falls a little short outside of that. And then, of course, right on time, Cyclo Winder. So this is the 6-cost I was just talking about, right? So during either attack step, immortality costs 1 or 4. So again, this is going to be really interesting to how now some of our decks can kind of cycle together, right? Because you can do stuff where you cycle 5 into Beldegor, then Beldegor dies, then you go into an attack with a 1-cost, then you bring back this guy, then you go into the 5-cost attacker, then you go back into Beldegor, right? And it's just a lot of fun with what you can be doing. And yes, you might be saying that is a billion cores, and yes, it is, but guess what? The purple decks want to go to the long game, and a lot of times if you're playing these immortal style of decks, you're just going to have 12 to 15 cores sitting around doing nothing. So if you have at least 1 Spirit and a couple Nexus on the board, spoiler, that's not hard to do in purple decks, right? You will have the full cost reduction for these guys as well. Now, again, it is otherwise a vanilla. It is a 3K, so there are some weird matchups where they could, especially if they're playing yellow, they could just chump block this and then deny you the rest of the cycle, so you don't get the multiple attacks. So that one's a little interesting. And then, of course, it has 7K on it for some reason as well, which, again, most of the time you're not going to want to do unless it's like the first card that you play of the chain, and then you're trying to bring out some other ones, so then you bring it to a 7K, so maybe you can threaten to trade up into something. So again, a lot of the immortal stuff is just going to be big brain plays. You have to figure out what is the number of copies of each one that you want to be doing. So that remains to be seen, but I do think the way that this fits into the cycle that you want to be doing, it probably does see play maybe only as a 1 or a 2 of, and then you can, you know, self-mill the other stuff that you want. But I think this is a very scary thing. A lot of people just, you know, aren't, you know, putting on their radar yet. But Immortal is a very strong effect, and one that I think we will see be refined in set 2. Going on from there, we have our Ripper Princess Azalea. It is a 2-cost summon reduction. It does have Curse, which is really, really nice. And then what's interesting is when summoned, if you summon the spirit from your hand, discard the top card of your deck. Exhaust the spirit if the discarded card is not a spirit card. So another card that, yes, goes into the undead package. Yes, lines up well with the serpent. It's a 2-drop that we can bring back off the skeleton. It has Curse, so we want to keep attacking with it, right? There's a lot of really interesting places that this card can fit, and I think the fact that it has Curse at even level 1 is really, really good. So I love this card. I think it's going to find home in one of the different purple decks. A lot to you know, remains to be seen on into exactly what, you know, numbers, which version of a dead, and all that stuff. But I think this card is absolute gas. And yes, the restriction might seem like a restriction at first, but again, it's probably what you want to be doing anyways, because you want to get more cards into your graveyard, and you are playing a very spirit-heavy deck anyways. So Ripper Princess, I think, is absolutely going to be a staple in some of the decks that we can expect to see at the start of set 2. And then this one's really funny because if you remember the Mummy Fan that was brought into the Black Lance list, right? Like, you just wanted something with heavy cost reduction and something that could also, you know, potentially bring back a Beldegor if you wanted. And Elefog is just a upgrade in every single possible way. It's a 5-cost with 4 reduction, and it has Curse. So congrats. So the Black Lance decks, this is automatically going to be a staple. You're going to put in some number of this. Card is just absolutely insane for what you want to be doing. It also becomes a 4 for 3, which is very fine, so you can dodge the Burning Forest. Like, I get it. It might not be the most exciting card to be like, hey, we just got a side upgrade because it's Cursed, but it is a very exciting upgrade for the deck that wants it. So absolutely gas. Love this card. 10 out of 10. Does everything you want to do in that deck. So I'm really glad that we do get to see like those style of upgrades in set 2, where it's like, hey, this is just purely better in every single way. You're always going to be running this card. It's super hype. It has Curse. It's just a huge upgrade for the deck. You love to see it. You know, we don't always need to see the most over-the-top crazy X-rares in every single set. Sometimes you just want something as simple and beautiful as this to upgrade your set 1 decks with. And I think on this note, they did a very solid job. Now getting into our Nexus card, so Dread Rock Fortress, which looks like a spirit at first glance, right? So 5 cost 3 reduction. During your attack step, when you reduce your opponent's life with an attack from one of your spirits, your opponent selects one of their exhausted spirits, remove 2 cores from it, and place it into your opponent's reserve. So, spoiler, absolutely insane card with the undead style of deck. Like, this is depths level of good for the undead deck. Now, is undead going to be good? Who knows? Like, that remains to be seen, but it's important to note, like, the Immortality deck cannot afford to run something like Depths where, you know, it gets online, it might draw you a couple cards, but then you are very quickly going to deck yourself out if you're not careful. So I think you probably run some copy of Depths just because it is a very good card, and the, you know, giving any spirit curse can be extremely relevant, but it's not going to be that auto 4-of that we've seen time and time again, because you will mill yourself out. And you don't want to go to 60 cards because then you're just going to be inconsistent. And this is the other half of the Flash Nexus. So during your opponent's attack step, you may destroy this Nexus to select one of your opponent's spirits, remove a core from it, and place it into their reserve. So now, if you get multiple of these, it is just threatening that comboing again with the whale, you now have an on-attack flash step removal to get them out of here, right? So that is very, very strong, and I think something that we are, you know, in terms of what we want to be doing with the undead deck, I think this is very, very strong for what it wants to be doing. The level 1 is very good. The level 2 is very good. Again, where is the undead deck going to land? Who knows? But I'm really excited to start brewing with this and get going, because this card is going to be a house for that deck. Going on from there, we have the Impaler Forest. During your attack step, when you destroy one of your spirits with one of your effects, spoiler, Nemesis deck, your opponent selects one of their spirits, remove a core from it, and place it into their reserve. So again, this one is, I really wish this was main and attack step, so you could do main step stuff with like Crimson Mail. So I think it's a little bit of a miss there, but obviously meant to be for Nemesis and very good for just pinging off extra cores. And then during opponent's end step, at the start of the step, you may discard the top card of your deck. If you do, select a spirit card in your trash and return it to the top of your deck. So this one is optional, but it's very good at finding us those key pieces that we want again. If our opponent answers it and says, hey, let's just, you know, go ahead and put this on top of our deck again, so we draw into it. So really, really interesting card. I think to get the most out of this, you are going to be wanting to play the Nemesis style of deck, so that you can get, you know, level 1 and level 2. But I would not be surprised if there are some control decks that play this as like a 2-of, just to get that level 2 effect. It is very, very strong. Like, oh, I can now get my Bishop or Curse Dragon back because I'm missing the other half of the combo. Oh, I'm getting my Maduke back because in some 4-for-1 way they got rid of it, but spoiler, now it's just coming back again. Like, there's so much you can do with this card in purple. Like, I think it's just absolutely insane. And ultimately, I think purple got the best review, you know, spoilers for, other than green, right? Other than green being a new color, being super exciting, all that stuff. I definitely feel like purple got the best cards out of set 2. And just so many of these just wanting to line up with one another very, very well. In the last Nexus, Monsterous Mausoleum. During your attack step, when one of your spirits with a soul core on it is blocked, remove a core from a blocking spirit and place it into its opponent's reserve. And then the other one is draw a card when one of your undead spirits is destroyed by your opponent. That is a flat effect. So this one's interesting because it then becomes like the optional depths for what we want to be doing, right? Combos very well with Whale. Yes, it lets us draw some cards if we need to. Our undead spirits, it's just whenever they die, so we can use this on offense and defense. Like, it's a really interesting card. I'm very curious to see where this lands, but I think the undead archetype is going to be eating very, very good in set 2. Now, going into our spells, we have Reanimate, which is just insane. 5 cost, 3 reduction. It does have a burst when your opponent resolves a when summoned. Discard the top 3 cards of your deck and return 1 purple spirit card from them to your hand. And then you can select a spirit card in your trash, cost 5 or fewer, and summon it without paying its cost. Like, that does a lot. So yes, that does say cost 5 or fewer. Does not say purple cost 5 or fewer. So obviously in purple, this is really great because you pay 2, get a 5 cost back. Then you can like loop into Beldegor. Like, I don't have to explain why this card is absolutely beyond cracked for purple. But for other cards, like for the King Charles that we're going to talk about in the yellow previews, like now we're going to get back these key pieces of our other engines. Yes, it does cost 5 to get the effect outside of purple. Like, you have to pay the full cost, but I think that's more than okay for what you want to be doing, right? Like, this has such insane future applications that I have no idea, like, how many combos this is going to open, like, right? Like, just like Lightning Aura did so much for red and, you know, giving curse units confront and stuff like that. Reanimate, I think, just really goes over the top, and, you know, there might not be anything that exciting in set, 2 for it, but it did get the SPR, and I think this is a card that is just way too insane. Like, it probably gets restricted at some point because they are going to print a 5-cost spirit outside of purple that just can really go the distance with this card. And again, I think there are cheeky combos that you can do in like purple green decks out of set 2 that are going to be very, very good. So I don't know, this might be the best purple card overall. I think it's insane. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. From there, we have the Hangman, 4 costs to reduction. Main or flash, select one of your opponent's spirits. If it attacks or blocks during this turn, remove 4 of its cores and place into your opponent's reserve. So this one's interesting because you have to like pre-commit it, but like that's fine if you know what they're going to be wanting to block with, or especially if it's like a non-armor purple card. Like it's cool at what it does. I think it's just not going to find a home when all the other purple spells are just like over the top bonkers. That said, I look forward to when I end up losing this to this card for whatever reason. And it's really nice that it has 3 reduction, but ultimately I think that the other spells in purple are just so much better that this one isn't anything to write home about. And then we have our 5 cost reduction Assassinate. Your opponent selects one of their exhausted spirits and destroys it. So this one is like so close to good. Like, yes, you can combo it with green, choose which one to exhaust, and then they have to kill that one. Like, there's a lot of really cool purple and green stuff in this set. But if your opponent like swung out on the previous turn, then you have to do like Deadly Balance into Assassinate to kind of clear the board that way. Or if they just swung with like their Rex because they know that the other spirits are just going to get chump blocked or whatever, then you can just kill the Rex. So like, I know there's a lot, the community is very split on this card. I think it's going to be insane. I think it's very good at what it wants to be doing, even if it is a little conditional, because this opens up options for green and purple decks, which that's fine. I think that like that is good enough. Like, not everything needs to be Deadly Balance strong, right? So, and it also has a pump if you need a pump effect, which can surprise some people out of purple decks. So yeah, I think this is a very good common that is going to see play. Like, I am excited to see where Assassinate goes, and the purple green decks in particular, people get brewing with. Then we have Crystal Crack, 3 costs, 1 reduction. Discard the top 2 cards of your deck, then draw a card. Like, that's fine. This does everything that you want to do for the purple self-mill decks, right? That's fine. This isn't that exciting to write about, or anything too much to say here. I do wish it was flash timing for the mill and draw, because I think that would be like way better, obviously, because then you could get like high roll Beldegor discards, right, and stuff like that. But ultimately, for what the self-mill deck wants, yeah, this is about as good as we could expect. I wish I had like one more reduction if I can be picky. Probably couldn't for balancing reasons, but I think this card is absolutely cracked for that deck. No pun intended, but it just does everything that you want it to be doing. And then if you get to the point where you don't want to mill anymore because you're worried about decking out, then it's a pump spell, which is super relevant outside of, or for purple, because people don't see it coming. So yeah, I think that just does everything it wants to be doing. So with that, we have wrapped up our purple review. What is your favorite card for set 2 in purple? I definitely got to give it up to Reanimate. I think this card just has insane future potential, and it's a gorgeous SPR that it got previewed. So really looking forward to seeing where this one goes. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. More set reviews to come in the future. Again, I am very excited for set 2 and, getting to start brewing with it. I'm going to print up proxies hopefully pretty soon. And there's just so much to look forward to with Battle Spirit Saga. So with that, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.